Disco happened. As soon as it was starting in obscure studios, he was there. This place where David Mancuso had this concept of having a non-profit party where he would bring people in, you would pay a donation. There was a giant room, we would have a giant mirrored ball. There'd be free water, bowls of fruit, a lot of drugs, where there's a sense of feeling safe. White, gay, black gay, Spanish gay, and some hippies. It was a party. It was like a birthday party for kids.
I want to see all my friends at once. I'd do anything to get the chance to go bang.
The Stonewall riots gave birth to a new culture, and gay New York sprang out from the underground into dance parties held in downtown lofts, heralding the birth of club culture. The Key Loft party was hosted by the unlikely figure of Timothy Leary disciple David Mancuso.
Yeah, certainly LSD had a role in it, you know, but not entirely, no. First I was in a loft space, which was in 60, I got in 65. So it was very rare to be living in loft spaces in New York anyway. I had all this space, so, you know, and I was always into sound, so I started having parties in my loft space.
It was private, and it was very special. David was very unique with his music. It was all about the music, and it was all about the sound. And you felt very special being able to get into the loft. People begged you outside, please take me in, but it was very private.
Usually most of us were socially outcast. You had socially different backgrounds, ethnically different backgrounds, you know.
I was a white boy from Brooklyn, Italian boy, and I partied amongst Asians, amongst Latins, amongst blacks, and I met people from all over the world. And it was a cultural experience, you know. To me, the loft was the first place I've ever gone to, where music was continuous.
I think he was one of the first to start making the musical connections that created what we think of as disco. You know, connecting rock and roll and Latin music and African music and all kinds of R&B, and really seeing how they fit together.
First time I saw a DJ who was not just playing records but creating atmosphere, and that was a big difference. And I realized that's what I wanted to do. Not play records, create atmosphere. It's 1970, and I had been going out dancing a little bit and collecting records. And I'm at a party at my brother's house.
and it's the most boring party, Snoresville, USA. Everyone's falling asleep. So I put on You're the One or something like that, and this girl comes out of the bedroom and says, "Hi, I'm Dale. I'm dating your brother. You like this music? I want to take you to a fabulous party." 647 Broadway, I'll never forget it. David Mancuso's loft. We go in this little hallway, open the door, and I move on to this dance floor. And as the record is playing, it comes to a peak, and these bright lights go on, and then everything goes off, and all I hear is this sound, this perfect sound. I knew in my soul, in my heart, in all my body, that that music was moving me to my core, and I knew it was gonna move a lot of people. And that was, for me, the beginning of dance music.
The music is just a reflection of the culture. It's a microcosm of what's actually happening out in the world. People started to ask for their voices to be heard. The women's movement, the gay movement, Black Power movement, all these things started to cross-pollinate each other, and we became comrades. And it played itself out in nightclubs. The Loft made you feel welcome, regardless of where you were coming from, if you were gay, straight, Black, white, Puerto Rican. It was the precursor, the template for those clubs that would follow.
The problems that we shared during the day, we came together in the evening to overcome together, or to get away from together, or to escape together. And one of the ways that we came together was on the disco dance floor.
In 1977, disco came into the mainstream. And it was an outgrowth of several factors that all came together at the same time. One was the emancipation of gay people, which created an explosion in the gay community of clubs that were opening up, and the visibility of being an out gay person, which had been very clandestine, been very underground before that time.
It really does all start with David Mancuso's Loft. It wasn't a bar, it was just his home. And he was having parties there every Saturday night. The first time I saw David Mancuso, he's in this dark booth, and all you see are his eyes and his beard and his hair. And so it actually looked like Jesus was in there playing records. In the front of the room, by the front windows and stuff like that, he kept the Christmas tree up year-round, with presents and toys and stuff like that, and there was a rocking horse and stuff like that underneath it, to kind of make people always feel like, you know, it was Christmas every time you came in there, because it really did.
The Loft started on Broadway at Great Jones, and in 1977, Soho was a vast wasteland. You know, people would look at you like, what are you, crazy? You're not talking about going down to Prince Street or going down to Crosby Street.
Going to the Loft for the first time, I was 16. I had rough times at home. And so I got out of the Bronx and straight to Manhattan. There's always one person that feels like the odd man out, or the odd girl out, if you will. You feel like the black sheep, or you're told you're the black sheep. You feel alone to a certain degree. Well, that's the way I felt until I went to the Loft. And I realized that there were more people in the world just like me. And so it made me completely comfortable. It's the first time I'd actually just completely let everything go.
You had guys who were 15, 16 years old, thrown out of their houses the day they had the guts enough to tell their parents that they were gay. Well, where did those people have to go? The one place where those people had to go was the Loft, where they were accepted for who they were.
Just the freedom, it spoke volumes about who and what I was, and that was it.
The origins of this globe-spanning, multi-billion-dollar high-tech entertainment business can be traced back to one room in a downtown block in New York City. It was in the home of DJ David Mancuso. In 1970, he started to put on all-night parties. He'd blow up some balloons, lay on a buffet, and play great music in a place called the Loft.
food and everything was free. Once you got in, you paid, you know, your contribution to the party at the door as a member, and the parties would go from midnight until the next day, whenever they decided to close, because this was not a club, this was his house.
The loft was a sight to behold, and there was harmony. There was harmony in the music, there was harmony in the behavior of the people, and everyone was interested in dancing and having a good time.
My first club that I enjoyed going as a dancer when I was old enough to go dancing really was the Loft.
The Loft captured the disinhibited spirit of a great house party and fused this with the production values of a proper entertainment venue. And at the heart of the Loft experience was a devotion to the music.
David played a record from beginning to end. There was no mixer. There was no turntables with pitch control. You heard the record the way it was made, the way it was pressed.
Mancuso wanted the Loft to showcase the music like no one else had ever done. And for help, he turned to a young sound designer called Alex Rosner. And he asked him to do something truly innovative.
David's vision was good quality sound. He had this idea, he told me, where he wanted high frequencies to emanate north, south, east, and west over the dance floor. And I thought that it wasn't such a great idea. I thought that it would be too much, and it would kill the people, it would hurt their ears. He said, never mind, just do it, make it.
Pushed by Mancuso, Alex and his team came up with a system that would surround clubbers with sound.
The tweet array was born, and it was wonderful.
With the four-way tweeter, an engineer made sure no one would ever experience music in a club in the same way again.
They added that little bit of sizzle and the directional aspects that the sound was coming from the dance floor, which is really the ideal situation. So you were immersed in the music, and everyone copied it. There came a time when every club in the world had one.
The clubs in those days, in the early 70s, were like La Jardine,
The Sanctuary,
The Loft. The Loft was pretty much one of the first nightclubs in New York City.
The dance floor would get so crowded that you were shoulder to shoulder with everyone else.
Music at the Loft was dance music. Anything from James Brown to Temptations.
For me, the Loft has a little bit of an edge to the garage and the gallery. None of them had that other spaciness and that other real delicate touch about certain records that made the Loft be what it was and created a whole other different dimension. It was really, truly an inspiration. It was truly like the only thing that ever existed that was like that. And I don't think that if the Loft had been there, the garage would have been quite the same. He certainly had a very clear vision of an aesthetic that he wanted to bring out and present to people, and a lot of that aesthetic sometimes had to do with sonics, on how good a record did sound, not just how great it was of a song, but how well it was recorded, on how it translated on sort of his absolute master system that he had there, which didn't need to be played very loud at all. It was not really apparent until you did experience it in those surroundings. The Loft has an immense contribution to a lot of what's going on right now.
This was a very private situation. The Loft was tended to not to be overgrown.
Well, people say the garage school of music, but really it's the loft school of music. You know, that's really what it is. It became called garage because the garage was the club that got, you know, all the notoriety, because David was never really interested in making it into a huge commercial success. David was more interested in creating an atmosphere, creating sort of a family.
The loft was a community. If you didn't have money, and as long as you had that invitation, you got in. Last thing in the world is be broke. Well, you want to be with your friends. You can't go out, you can't do this, you can't do that. Oh yes, but you can still go out and see your friends that night. Take an IO, write down IOU. People didn't abuse that system. And so you never had to worry about missing a party if you didn't want to.
The loft is a feeling. I don't even know how to go out anymore because in some ways, I'm still looking for that, you know, and it ain't happening. For me, I haven't found another DJ yet that has moved me. The way David Mancuso has moved me.
I could find a space today, but the overhead, what is that gonna mean? Is people with less money could be able to afford to come in, as well as people with more money? I can't go into a situation like that. It has to be something that can be affordable. It's there. Now it's getting harder and harder to do that in Manhattan. I mean, if I had something else going where I could afford to support it, then I wouldn't mind doing it. I've done that from time to time for the loft many years ago. So it has to be, again, if you can mix the economical groups together, that's where you have social progress. That's very important to me.
99 Prince Street, and I was told it wasn't the original loft, but that's the one I went to, you know, with my little rascal card that everybody wanted, you know, membership card. And I didn't realize how valuable that was till I, you know, came out the train station. Everybody's like, yo, man, yo, can I go with you, man? Can I go with you? You know, everybody was like trying to get in on this card. You know, I'm like, damn, what kind of card I got here? You know, jeez, yo, man, I give you $10, man. Yo, I gotta go in as your guest. I was like, oh, no, you. Shucks. But, you know, it was pretty valuable, you know. I'll never forget it.
Was that influential?
Sure, absolutely. Definitely. I mean, it changed my whole attitude from commercial radio music or whatever I bought at first to, you know, the basis of what I do now, which was a whole wide range of, you know, music or whatever. So David gets, you know, the hat off definitely for me. I mean, everyone's into Levan, and I love Levan, I love the garage, but the loft did it to me first. Definitely.
I wanted freedom. I wanted to feel free and to be free, see people being able to be free in a situation where where it was private. And the only way you can do that is that way.
David Mancuso went to court so that he could have a court say, you do not need a cabaret license, people can dance in your home, and you can have a party.
I used to listen to acid rock and this and that, and blah, 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 Mick Jagger, you know, Midnight Rambler and all that stuff, you know, just in my loft, because my loft was my home.
We didn't know what the hell we were going to play. Remember that. We didn't know what record was coming next. For all those years, we never knew what the next record was going to be. The loft really took hold as an event, or as a place to go.
That was very nicely put.
In about 1972. It was 72 because David invited me in late 1970. And I, in turn, took Michael Capello and Francis and a bunch of other DJs.
I had such a social life at the time. I had so much free time.
So Francis would come whenever he could, because it was only on a Saturday night, and we all worked on Saturday nights.
So I would come after work.
And the loft was only open until 7 a.m. So we would leave work at 3:30. By the time we packed up our records.
Saturday night was 3 o'clock.
Yeah, Saturday night, the law in New York, I don't know what the law is now.
3, I don't know, but it changed.
2:45, we start playing the last record.
You played the last record. It was last call at 2:30 for drinks.
So 3 o'clock on Saturday, 4 o'clock during the week,
You
every other
out.
night. So we'd get to the loft at maybe 4 o'clock, so we'd have like 3 hours of the loft, but we'd catch like the last bit of the peak. But this is again now 1972. Although the loft had been happening before that for a while, but it was very, very underground, and it was black and it was gay, and it was just the most wonderful place I'd ever been, really, as far as.
It was someplace you could blend in and you were different.
Yeah.
And you could be like,
Yeah, nobody-
and you could be like comfortable.
Yeah, the loft was the most comfortable place you've ever been.
It wasn't like the sanctuary where you were like, it was like the place became occasionally with the lighting, a show place. You know, you could kind of blend in the loft.
Who's Francis Grasso?
That's a good question.
And what did Francis Grasso do that's so significant today?
It's a heck of a question. When Francis, I guess, elevated the art to, or started making an art, something that became artful. I guess that's what Francis Grasso did.
Is Francis Grasso discovered mixing? Was Francis Grasso?
I don't know. He was probably the first DJ, but I don't know if he discovered mixing. It just turned out, I guess, like you discover fire. You know, one day something got hot, and they were eating it raw, and they decided it tastes better hot and cooked. I don't know. It was like that. It was like a whirlwind.
The fact that there were two turntables and somebody was mixing records together, not just playing one record after another, but creatively mixing, and we didn't call it mixing, and this has to be pointed out. We called them changes. Did you hear that change? Did you hear that change? Did you hear the change I made with those two records?
I actually listened to. I actually said those words changes.
Yeah.
That's what it was. First of all, you have to know the music.
First, you really have to know the music.
Really?
You had to know every bar, every note of it.
On a regular LP at the time, you had the lighter sides would be where there was vocal quality, and the darker part would be sound. And you had to know that too. If you just want to play bit.
We were reading the grooves. Without headphones, we used to read the grooves. That's exactly what we did. We read the grooves.
How other things we did.
How else would you? That's what we did. We read the grooves.
I mean, you really had to know the music and know how it started. And like I said, the average 45 at the time was about 2 minutes and 13 seconds. The average
night was about 12 hours. At the Sanctuary, the people were like the show almost, because it was crazy. People were nuts. Everybody was just wild, absolutely wild. But at the loft, the place, the loft, the music, and the sound was the party. That was the event. So it was a whole different. It was all transitions when the party became.
The party.
The party, exactly. With us, it was a night in a nightclub, in a bar with liquor, and you had to deal with all kinds of different things. At the loft, there was no liquor, so basically, you had people who were just expressing themselves in a whole different way. It was just, it was the tightness and the oneness with the music was just amazing.
Mancuso was arrested.
Yeah, David was arrested. Absolutely, I was there that night. What happened was at the Haven and the Sanctuary, we used to have a light system where green was there, the cops are nearby, red was there at the door, white, they're in.
David was taking it to run his risk, and even having that kind of club.
Yeah, it wasn't a club; it was a party.
The police department for one.
Yeah, I mean he was having a gathering for people.
I have a lot of close friends.
It was time to just be up front, be who you were, and enjoy nightlife, because it was the only nightlife we had.
The most dedicated crowds I've ever seen, and they were dedicated in the garage, but nowhere near the gallery and the loft. You'll never see a more dedicated crowd. Where you, it just gives you chills. Dedication, I mean, a lifestyle, man. You know what I'm saying? I remember asking a friend of mine when he told me he went to the loft at Prince Street for the first time, and I knew exactly what to ask him. because I knew that I was going to get a thrill asking him. I go, what did you say to yourself when you first seen them guys dancing the way they danced there, that lofting? He goes, man, I couldn't believe my eyes. He goes, those guys were breaking their backs on the dance floor. That's exactly how he put it.
The loft was the soul. The soul of it. It was the heart, the soul. Like the garage was the party.
You went to the loft, it was a house party, and it was more feeling because they were where the real dancers came from. That's when you use acrobatics, gymnastics, you use tap dancing, you use modern dance. The energy level was very strong because we had to. Most of us, the thing about it is, David wanted to do it like an orphanage. He realized that he was an orphan and he wanted to take that same kind of thing with him. Yeah. So he brought it to everybody and he fed everybody. Everybody paid a certain fee. The fee was just like $9.99 or $10.99 or $11.99, $12.99, and take that penny. And when you were there, everybody wore baggy pants, the gas pants, the web their parachute. When it came down to having like,
mine on.
But I'll tell you,
I'll tell you, $20 for a pair of those pants right there.
What the phenomenon was,
and that was
that
the
now,
slide through the dance floor, lovely.
Now,
right now, the funniest thing is, as time goes on, the dancing that we were doing there at the time, we had no name for it.
No.
Now I find it kind of ironic that it's termed as lofting.
When I came to the loft, and me and George were already going to the garage, we thought we were dancers, you know? I went to the loft and I was actually intimidated because the guys were doing like things that we never ever saw. And they were so different in their own way that you gave them as much respect that we couldn't even get on the floor, George and I. We wouldn't dare make a move because we were like, this is the real deal.
The mix was not really the priority. The priority was the feeling, creating the feeling from one record to the next. The most important thing was not really to match the pace of one record to the other. It was to tell a story. If you're a DJ who sort of tells stories with the records and matches feelings, I don't believe that it's anything anybody can really teach you. It comes from within inside of you. Either you have it or you don't have it. To be the type of DJ that, you know, now is associated with the garage sound, you had to have that instinctual thing for matching the feelings and telling a story. And David Mancuso, of course, was the originator of that. And then you had, you know, Nicky Ciano and Larry Levan, who were both teenagers when David was playing on Broadway. They would try to sneak in there because you were supposed to be 18 to get in. And they, you know, they sort of studied David and then, you know, made their own style of it, but within the same school. And that is the feeling that Larry carried over to the garage.
It
world away from Saturday Night Fever or the Village People, when it started out, disco was way underground. Our story begins at the dawn of the 1970s with an anonymous-looking loft in downtown Manhattan, 674 Broadway, just north of Houston Street. Not a discotheque in the strict sense, the loft was the place where the movement really started. It was rented by the unlikely hero of New York's underground dance scene, a long-haired, hippie-ish native called David Mancuso.
This is about music. It's about socializing. These are fundamentals of life. The environment should be to turn on the senses and nothing that would cloud the senses. So visually, sound-wise, everything just comes together that way. It's a natural, organic environment without a structure, without rules. Don't do this or do that. Just go with what you feel.
DJ Nicky Siano.
David took all the risks. And 69, 70, 71, he took a lot of risks. A lot of risks to make the best sound system ever. A lot of risks to make the atmosphere work as well as the music, joining atmosphere and music. So in other words, you come into a place and you're in an environment. You're not in a club, you're in an environment. And nothing like that was happening anywhere. It was a 2,000 square foot loft. And he had built a structure about 3/4 of the way through that cut the end off into a separate room. And it was his bedroom above, and below was the DJ booth.
Well, the loft was a dance club. Its primary goal was dancing.
DJ David DePino.
Before that, it was bars that had jukeboxes, so you really went out to drink and socialize. There really was never a dance floor. You just danced in an area that had no chairs, maybe. But the loft concentrating, the sole purpose was non-stop dancing. You know, socializing second, no bar, no liquor. And that was a big change for people.
Mancuso's loft parties became the stuff of legend. People met, people danced. Connections were made, alliances formed, ideas exchanged. Throughout the early 70s, the loft, as it became known, was the center for almost everything. DJ and the godfather of house, Frankie Knuckles.
It set the tone. If there had to be a textbook about how to open and run an underground nightclub, that would be definitely the first 5 or 6 chapters, I would think. It was extremely exclusive. But it wasn't exclusive for snobbish reasons or trying to one-up somebody or to try and be better than anyone else. It's just that it was something that could only cater to someone that could really, really understand and had an open enough mind to relate to the music.
It's hard to put the loft in perspective in a way because it was the first place that I went to where I heard a disc jockey playing records continuously in a way that had an emotional effect.
Veteran journalist Vince Aletti.
Where he clearly had a sense of the passage of the evening, starting quietly and building to a kind of emotional and physical peak, and then taking the crowd through kind of waves of feeling. The music really was about having a good time.
As well as being an amazing night out, the loft was a breeding ground for fresh-faced talent who would go on to become some of dance music's greatest stars. As yet unknown, Frankie Knuckles, Nile Rodgers, Larry Levan, Jellybean, Junior Vasquez, all passed through Mancuso's doors at one time or another. By invitation only, it was here that the disco DJs, musicians and promoters of the future would gather and party to the funkiest rock, soul and Latin records. A scene was definitely in the making. David Mancuso.
Social progress is very slow. It's the slowest thing that probably happens in this world. But, you know, anything out of the so-called norm, there wasn't a place for you, whether it was your choice of music or your dress style, your lifestyle, this, that, whatever. I know myself, any of us, we would beat a path to any door where we could just go and hang out and just be ourselves.
The Loft was taking it a whole step further. I mean, it was predominantly black, gay in the beginning. It was so outside the prejudices, how much further can you get?
DJ and producer, Jazzy B.
What's important as well to understand is when Mancuso was doing those kind of parties and stuff like that, it was for specific audiences, for his people, you know. These are my friends, come and hey, let's hang out. And they were all like-minded people who at that time probably seemed to be huge. The fact that it was probably only a select few hundred people who actually knew about it, who was on that scene or cool enough to be in that kind of vibe.
At the epicenter was David Mancuso himself. Gentle, serious, and deeply spiritual about music, he presided over his parties with 2 pairs of clip-shorn speakers and a fair degree of hypnotic charisma.
David was very quiet, personality-wise, very hypnotistic-like. David just played. He was intense, mystical.
Every time I see that woman, every time I see that girl, secret feelings come inside me. Something's burning in my head. Every time I see that woman.
I always said David was like Charles Manson. He just had long dark hair, mustache, very handsome, and the little light just shining on his face. The club was very dark with one little light on the mirror ball. That was it. And he played deep music, and it was very spiritual in there. And I always said David looked like, you know, he could will people, like with his mind. It was just like, wow. There was moments when David put an intense record on, you looked and he had that expression on his face and the room would scream.
The records were selected with great care. The sound system was flawless. Individual tracks were played in sequence as a form of emotional storytelling. Balloons featured heavily. David Mancuso.
Somehow or another, you get to points where it all kind of works out, where the next song that plays really starts presenting itself. To the point where the music's really playing you. You start off kind of organized and you start off this first bardo. But the whole idea is to let go and hopefully the experience where you will shed your ego, where you can really just kind of go, let it take you. And that does happen. It could last a minute, it could last 5 hours. But it's like music's like our friend. If we listen, it will show us and tell us the way.